Mr. Chair. Mr. Moore, shortly after they passed the Clean Water Act in 1971, continuing to today, Congress has appropriated money to the EPA to provide nonprofit organizations with experience and with expertise in the water and wastewater industry to assist rural communities, to assist them in operations, in training, management, regulatory compliance for their water and their wastewater systems. But it seems to me that the EPA over the last several years has shifted a portion of that funding provided for this initiative away from this previous on-the-ground technical assistance and training to other methods that included funding entities with very little or no experience in the water industry, with no established relationships with the utilities that are being served. Things like webinars were used as a primary tool to provide outreach and training rather than people on the ground. Do we want communities and utilities to use a website or a webinar or call some university automated helpline to get help, or is it better to have them rely on experienced, boots-on-the-ground technicians who can provide, on-site training, technical assistance, especially during an emergency? And I just appreciate your thoughts on that.
Well, I do know that the Circuit Rider program has taken cuts in the last few years, and a lot of states have lost circuit riders. There's nothing wrong with the webinars, but in the state of Oklahoma, we have many small rural water systems that may have 100, users. They operate out of an office, at someone's home. They do not have access to this, the webinars and where the circuit riders can come in and they do a job. They are there, face to face, and they see the infrastructure, they see the problem, and they normally have immediate response, that they can implement.
And you think they have knowledge of what the situation is on the ground?
Yes.
Because they live there, they're part of the community.
Yeah, and the circuit riders, they are there for that reason, and they have seen other systems, the neighboring systems, the systems across the state, and they have gathered that information, and they can bring that information that applies to your system and give it to you.
In your testimony, you talked about the on-site technical assistance that allows communities to comply with the EPA rules. I just ask how valuable it is, this on-site technical assistance, especially to utilities that lack the capacity or the financial ability to have the expertise to comply with the EPA.
Yes, it's critical that we fund these circuit rider programs. Like I said, on the very small rural water systems in the small cities, they rely very heavily on that technical assistance.
Thank you. Mayor Berger, if I could ask you about, just a question that you might have some insight into. We have several small communities, Wyoming, Bridger Valley, Southwest Wyoming, where they were in compliance with the EPA's arsenic maximum contaminant level standard until that level was changed from 50 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion a number of years ago. These communities had arsenic levels in the mid to low 20s, but the EPA lowered the level from 50 to 10. So, for decades, the 50 parts per billion was an acceptable health level. Suddenly it's changed, and it becomes very expensive, very cost prohibitive to implement the technology to get down to that 10 parts per billion. Some engineering quotes in the first years were in the millions to get that number down. So the costs have even come down to maybe $100,000, but for a community of 200 to 400 people, that money is still out of reach when you think about the other issues that a mayor has to deal with. Other people clamoring for that same money, and you're saying more bang for the buck with other things. So should we just be reducing the regulatory burden on communities to allow them to have the funds to address the immediate health and safety challenges of an aging infrastructure and give them the authority to make these decisions?
Well, there's no question that the technology of measurement has changed dramatically over the last 40 years. Who could have imagined that we would ultimately be measuring things down to the nano level? And following the measurement, the regulations have become mandates to treatment levels. So the question becomes, for any given circumstance, when you're looking at a single regulation, how does that compare to the other public health challenges that a community has? And I think that often the regulators come in a very siloed kind of way. They're charged with this particular mandate and ignore the rest of the mandates that a community might have. So I think, again, integrated planning allows folks to be able to look at all the challenges in front of them and make choices and set priorities. And I think that's why it has to become a part of the law.
Thank you, Mayor Berger. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.